نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين صدق الله العظيم صلى الله على النبي الأمي وآله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلاة وسلام عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our cherisher and our sustainer, and choices of durood and salam be upon his beloved, our master arwahuna fida Sayyidina Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, today we will be discussing the enmity that Shaytaan has for us, and for us to understand the ways in which Shaytaan attacks insan, and for us to prepare ourselves so that whenever he does attack us, then we are cognizant and aware of the traps that he sets, and that we may defend ourselves from the mischief and the traps of Shaytaan. So Shaytaan is that creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has been granted the power to do what he wills in terms of misleading insan till the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted him that respite. And it is for us insan to be cognizant of this and to understand that Shaytaan is that personality who was removed from Jannah because of Abul Bashar Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. And because of this, his enmity is with all of the progeny of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. Until the day of judgment, he will try his utmost best to remove as many insan from Jannah as possible and to take them into Jahannam with himself. So this is his mission. And we need to save ourselves from his mischief. In order to save ourselves, we need to understand how does Shaytaan work, how does he attack a person, how does he trap a person, and then we will be able to defend ourselves. As once Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam was walking and he came across Shaytaan, and he asked Shaytaan, he saw Shaytaan walking with a lot of things that he was carrying. And Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam asked him, what are all of these things that you are carrying? And Shaytaan replied that these are the traps with which I ensnare and I entrap man, insan, and I mislead man with this. So Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, being a Nabi, he asked Shaytaan, have you ever misled me? Have you ever entrapped me in any of your traps? And Shaytaan then mentions that yes, there was once when you were eating, I made you eat to your fill, and because of this I made you lazy in your salah and made you lazy in your zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam then took an oath and said, I take an oath by Allah that I will never eat to my stomach's full again. And Shaytaan then replied and said, I take an oath that I will never give advice to a Muslim again. So from this we can understand that Shaytaan does not leave anyone. He even tries with the Anbiya Ikram in order to entrap them. So we, being sinful servants and sinful bandas and bondsmen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that come nowhere close to the maqam and the status of the Anbiya Ikram, we need to be more cognizant of how Shaytaan works and prevent ourselves from becoming entrapped in his traps. Now, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala an narrates a hadith where he has mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam once took a stick and on the ground he drew a straight line, and he said to the Sahaba Ikram that this is the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the Sirat Mustaqim, the straight path. And then Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he drew lines slightly on the right and slightly on the left of that line. And he then mentioned to the Sahaba Ikram that these are the lines, these lines represent the paths of Shaytaan. And this is those paths on which Shaytaan misleads man and that takes man to destruction. And from this we can understand that even if a person deviates slightly from the straight path, from the Sirat Mustaqim, then one will find oneself being misled into a path that leads to destruction. And this is why we need to always be cognizant of the commandments of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and to the best of our ability follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow the commands in the Holy Qur'an, and follow the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, as that entails the Sirat Mustaqim. Now, Shaytaan traps people in many ways. Sometimes he traps a person by making them lazy before they even perform a good deed. Sometimes he makes a person perform so many good deeds, or makes them have the intentions of performing so many good deeds, that they become overwhelmed with all of their intentions, and they think to themselves, there's so much for me to do, and then they become despondent and they leave everything. This is also a trick from Shaytaan. Sometimes you would find that you make a good intention to do something, and then you have another good intention, then you have another good intention, until a point that you don't know which one to start with. And Shaytaan causes this confusion until you decide, let's just leave it. And this is also entrapment from Shaytaan. Sometimes Shaytaan, after you've performed the deed, Shaytaan then causes you to have pride in your heart, where you think that you are better than others because you've performed this and the others don't perform this. And this is how, after you perform the good deed, Shaytaan then destroys your deeds. So there's many ways where Shaytaan attacks us. And there's one way in which Shaytaan attacks us is, he tries to make us use our intellect to override the Sharia in our minds. So sometimes when the Sharia says something, we try to use our intellect to think that we can do good without following the Sharia. We can do good by slightly deviating from the Sharia, not understanding the wisdom behind why Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam mentioned a certain thing in the Sharia, and not understanding under what conditions can those conditions be avoided or be violated under certain scenarios. And these only the Muftiya Ikram, the Ulama Ikram can guide us on, in which case that certain things can be avoided, or in which case certain things does not need to be followed. As an example, we know that to drink alcohol is absolutely haram in Islam. However, when it comes to a case where a person needs to save their lives and there is absolutely no other source of nutrition, source of drink or food for a person, and that person needs to survive, in that case, a person is allowed to have a sip of alcohol in order to save his or her life. Again, this is because in the Sharia, there are certain conditions under which certain things can be overruled. But we are not to use our own intellect to overrule these things. We are to consult with the Ulama Ikram, to consult with the Muftiyan Ikram, and they will then guide us. And this is also a trap that Shaytaan makes us fall into, where he tries to make us use our own intellect, thinking that we are going to do good, but in actual fact, it can lead us into destruction. And in order for us to understand this a bit better, I would like to narrate an incident from the time of the Bani Israel, and this is mentioned by Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam himself, and this is narrated by Sayyidina Imam Ghazali Rahmatullahi in his masterpiece Mukashifatul Quloob. So Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam mentioned that during the time of the Bani Israel, there was a very pious ascetic. There was a very pious man, and this man was constantly engrossed in the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he attained the qurb, the nearness, the proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Shaytaan wanted to mislead him. Shaytaan wanted to drop him from his maqam that he had received. So Shaytaan then devised a plan. And again, this makes us understand how intricate sometimes Shaytaan devises his plans that is beyond our understanding. Sometimes we think that if Shaytaan is going to trap us, it's going to be glaring in our faces. It's going to be obvious that this is from Shaytaan. But in most cases, Shaytaan is so conniving that when we find ourselves in a situation, we often don't realize that Shaytaan is misleading us and making us do something without us even realizing that this thing is wrong. And this person, from the time of the Bani Israel, this worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Shaytaan decided that he wanted to mislead him, he got a girl in a faraway place afflicted with an illness of the stomach. And eventually she became very ill. And after some time, Shaytaan then put whispers in the ears of the parents of that girl that there's no one who can cure this girl except for this pious man. So these parents, this family, then traveled all the way to this pious man's house in order to seek a solution, in order to seek shifa, in order to seek a cure for their daughter. Now when they reached his house and they knocked on the door, and when he came out, they requested that he keep the girl with him in order for him to cure her. And immediately he refused, because he knew immediately that it was impermissible for him to be alone with another stranger female, with a na-mahram female. So the first response that he gave was, he said, no, I'm not going to do this. He refused. But these parents, they continued to insist, they continued to make a plea with this person that they want to leave their daughter so that he may cure her. And eventually this person became persuaded, and he eventually agreed to keep the daughter with him. Now you can see in this instance, his first reaction was in accordance with the Sharia, in accordance with the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But because Shaytaan eventually whispered in his ears that he would be doing good by curing somebody, by helping this family, he eventually became persuaded, thinking that he is going to do a good deed by helping this family out, and he agrees to keep this girl. But this was all the plot and the plan of Shaytaan. And this was the trap that Shaytaan had set in order to mislead this man and drop him from the maqam that he had received. So eventually the parents leave, and every day when this girl used to come to this man for her treatment, Shaytaan used to make her appear more beautiful and more charming than she used to be. And this again makes us understand the traps of Shaytaan. It makes us understand how Shaytaan works. Sometimes we find that our women folk of this day and age, they don't want to cover themselves properly. They don't want to have parda. They don't want to wear the niqab. And they say, who's going to look at me? People are not going to look at me. I'm not that beautiful. And they make all types of excuses, not realizing that it is not about how beautiful you are or how beautiful you are not. It is about how Shaytaan uses you in order to mislead other people. It is how Shaytaan uses you as a tool in order to trap other people. And this is how Shaytaan works. And even in this case, even though this girl was not that beautiful, but Shaytaan made her appear more beautiful and charming to this man. So every day she used to come for a treatment. Every day Shaytaan used to make her appear so charming and so beautiful, until one day this man could not resist and he eventually committed zina with her. Allahu Akbar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from this. So now this man, being an abid, being a worshipper, devout worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night, now thinking that he was going to do a good deed, thinking above the Sharia that he was going to help this person by using his own intellect, now he ended up committing zina with this girl. And it does not end there. After committing zina, Shaytaan then comes to him and whispers in his ears that now your reputation is at stake. What will people say when they find out that you have committed zina? What will people say about you? Your entire ibadat, your reputation of being a pious man will be all down the drain. You will become disgraced. So Shaytaan then puts all of these whispers in this pious man's head, in his mind, making him think about his reputation instead of thinking about his akhirah, instead of him thinking about what answer will he give in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sin that he has just committed. And Shaytaan diverts his mind into thinking about how he will be disgraced in front of the people. So eventually Shaytaan gives him the idea and tells him that you should kill this girl and bury her somewhere. And when the family comes to ask about her, then you say to them that she died because of an illness, which they left her for, and you buried her. So this man eventually thinks that this is a good idea, and he then kills the girl and he buries her. So now imagine this person initially refused to keep this girl because he knew the fitna that she could cause by staying alone with him. But then he used his intellect, which was twisted by Shaytaan's whispering, thinking that he would be doing a good deed. And now imagine, He thought that he would be doing a good deed, but he ends up committing zina. He ends up murdering someone, and now he's going to end up lying to the family, telling them that this girl died because of her illness. So Shaytaan whispers this, and this is what he does. And then Shaytaan goes to the family members, to the parents, and whispers in their ears, saying to them that this person that you left your child with, he has actually committed zina with them, he killed her, and he has buried her. So they then become upset, and they travel all the way to his house, and they knock on the door and they ask, "Where's our daughter?" The once pious man replies and says, "She was very ill, and due to her illness, she eventually passed away, and I buried her." But because Shaytaan had whispered in their ears of the reality, they insisted, and eventually they were becoming harsh with him until the point where he confessed what he had done to the girl. And at this point, they then got this man apprehended, and they wanted qisas, they wanted retribution, and they wanted him killed for killing their daughter. And at that point, when he was about to be hanged, Shaytaan then comes to this person and says to him that I was the person that inflicted this illness upon this girl. I was the person that put the whispers in the ears of those parents that this is what you have done. The situation that you are in is because of me. But if you want, I can still save you. I can still take you out of this misery of yours, of this disgrace of yours. But you will have to listen to my condition. So the man asks, "What do you want me to do?" So Shaytaan says, "I want you to make 2 prostrations, 2 sajdas to me." Again, from where this person was about day and night, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being cognizant and mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not worrying about the dunya, because of the whispers and attacks and traps of Shaytaan, he reached such a point where he was more worried and more concerned about his dunya. He was more concerned about being disgraced in front of the people, instead of worrying about what answer he's going to give in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even at this juncture, instead of wondering and being concerned about what is going to happen to his akhirah, he instead worries about his disgrace in front of the people, and he prefers to make sajda and go into kufr by making sajda to Shaytaan instead of being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when Shaytaan makes this request, this man then makes 2 sajdas to Shaytaan, and he leaves the fold of Islam. He becomes a kafir. And after he does this, Shaytaan then says, "I have no dealings with you. I am not concerned with you. I have nothing to do with you." And Shaytaan then leaves. And after he leaves, this person is killed, and he dies as a murtad. Allahu Akbar. Imagine a person that had such proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who was such a devout worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He reached such a stage that he left this dunya without iman. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from the traps of Shaytaan. So you can see how Shaytaan does not leave anyone. Sometimes we feel proud and we feel that, you know what, we have so much of ibadat, nothing can happen to me. I'm steadfast in my ibadat, I read my wazaif, I read my holy Qur'an, etc. And we become overconfident of our own ibadat, thinking that nobody can mislead us. And sometimes even when we say to people, don't spend time with the bad mazhabs, because they will infiltrate your iman, they will take your iman away, they will infiltrate your heart with their corrupt beliefs. And people say, no, I know where I stand. I know my beliefs and they know their beliefs, and we have a relationship where we don't discuss iman, we don't discuss deen, we just have a mutual relationship, we are friends. But it doesn't work like that. This is also a whisper from Shaytaan that makes us overconfident of our own beliefs, makes us overconfident of our iman. And we need to take cognizance of this waqiyah, this narration from Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, that even in this instance, where a person is such a devout worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Shaytaan entraps him to such an extent that he eventually leaves this dunya without iman. And this is mentioned in the Holy Qur'an, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Qur'an, Inna shaytana lil insani aduwwun mubin. Indeed, Shaytaan is an open and manifest and a great enemy of insan, of man. And this we need to understand, and we need to always be aware of this. And this incident that I had narrated to you now, this is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions with regard to this in the Holy Quran, where He says, كَمَثَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِذْ قَالَ لِلْإِنسَانِ كْفُرْ فَلَمَّا كَفَرَ قَالَ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّنْكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the example of the devil, when he said to man, disbelieve. So when he has rejected faith, he says, I am unconcerned with you. Indeed, I fear Allah, the Lord of the creation. So this is exactly what Shaytaan did with this man, with this once a pious person who had the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He makes him prostrate to him. He makes him commit the ultimate guna of shirk. And then he leaves saying, I have nothing to do with you. And it destroys the man's dunya, and it destroys his akhirah. So he becomes disgraced in this dunya, and he becomes disgraced in the hereafter. And all because he thought, using his intellect, that he was doing a good deed by not worrying about the Sharia. And this is something that we need to always be cognizant of. Always follow the Sharia of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alaihi wasallam. Always remember that the Sharia is above everything, whether it is our own parents, whether it is our own lineage, our grandparents, our elders. The Sharia is above every mufti, every alim, every pir or murshid. The Sharia of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam is the ultimate commandments that we need to follow. And if anyone commands us to do anything that is contrary to that, it does not matter how high a position they have in this dunya, what titles they have, but if they say something that is contrary to the Sharia, then we need to avoid those people and stay away from such instructions and commandments, because such things can lead us astray and can lead to destruction if we try to use our intellect over the Sharia. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq and the hidayat to follow the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow the commandments of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and to follow the sunnah of Huzur alayhi salam, and to stay away from using our intellect to override the Sharia. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المؤمنين والمؤمنات إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. جزاكم الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.